And welcome. This is a call to order for the Buncombe County Planning Board on October the 20th, 2025. And we'll begin with a few announcements. Today, we will have one public comment period. This will be during our general public comment period on any topic where thoughts wish to be shared with the planning board and the planning staff. And this will be right after the minutes are approved and a summary of our non-quorum meeting last month will be discussed. And if you wish to speak during this public comment period, please sign up on the sheet by the door. And each person will have 3 minutes to speak. Also, to ensure there are no conflicts of interest on anything that is voted on today, I will read you the statute of 160D-109 regarding conflicts of interest for appointed boards. Appointed board members, members of appointed boards shall not vote on any advisory or legislative decision regarding a development regulation adopted pursuant to this chapter where the outcome of the matter being considered is reasonably likely to have a direct, substantial, and readily identifiable financial impact on the member. An appointed board member shall not vote on any zoning amendment if the landowner of the property is subject to a rezoning petition or the applicant for the text amendment is a person with whom the member has a close familial, business, or other associational relationship. Is there anyone who feels like they would have that kind of conflict today? Very good. Then we will move on. And I think the staff has some announcements to make today.
We're going to wait on Jillian for we're talking about item 7 on the agenda. Oh, I'm sorry, we're on 3. I do not have an announcement at this time.
Okay, very good. Then we'll move right along to a roll call of the board members, and we'll start on the end with Liza.
Here.
Okay.
Jay Marino. Carl Coon here.
Ken Con here.
Nancy Waldrop here.
John North here.
Alan Coxey here.
Eric Robinson here.
All right, very good. We do have a quorum today, so that much is good news. The next thing we need to do is to approve the agenda for today. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then the agenda passes, and we need to now approve the minutes from August the 18th, 2025, since we couldn't do that last month. So do I have a motion for that?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. And now we will review the questions about our last month's quorum. If there are any, and I think Jillian, are you going to address that?
So that is just, Britton sent you notes from the last meeting, but they're not minutes because there was no quorum. And this is just your chance to ask questions about those or tell us if anything needs to be changed. But you're not voting on them because there was no quorum. It's just notes.
They look good to me. Any thoughts? Are we all good? All right, I think we're good with those. And now that will take us to our general public comment. Is anyone wishing to speak today?
Is there a chance at the end of the meeting?
No, this is it for today.
This is the other chance.
Right. And if you'll tell us your name again and the general area of the county that you live in, that will be great.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bernard Arguier. I've been an Asheville resident since 1992, and I was involved with the city of Asheville's lighting ordinance and with the original and only Buncombe County lighting ordinance that's being proposed to be changed. I was here at the last meeting. I had just a few points to bring out. I saw a note in one of the PDF files on the planning board site that mentioned something about the board recommended 3,000 Kelvin and lower for all light fixtures except sporting fields, which have their own regulations. Is that already a done deal, or is that a proposal?
I think that's something we will be discussing today because we couldn't vote on anything last time.
Okay,
So we will take that up today.
okay. Yeah, and that's in accordance with many other cities and American Medical Association and a lot of other groups that are now keeping that LED Kelvin down, so it's not so glaring. One thing I also mentioned, and I hope it's being looked at, when you regulate dusk to dawn yard lights, because a lot of them are installed by the homeowner, it would be wise to use lumens and not foot candles. They're not good at figuring out what you need a tool for foot candles. They go to the store to buy that light, and lumens are on the package. So I recommend you, in that one case, use something they can relate to, which is lumens. The other thing is you need to address how non-compliant fixtures come into compliance. Is it some timeline? When the bulb goes out, you need to put a compliant bulb in, or maybe both, maybe a timeline, and you get the sooner of this timeline or when the bulb goes out. I don't know. But I think that needs to be addressed. Maybe it has been addressed and I just didn't see it. And lastly, floodlights. In Buncombe County, Asheville prohibits all floodlights, period, because they're not full cutoff, because they're tipped up and flood up, a commercial parking lot or work area. And unless they're 1,250 lumens or lower, that's pretty low lighting. If it's above 1,250, you can't have it at all. And Henderson County, no floodlights, no matter what the luminosity. They're just banned. I don't see the word floodlights in the current ordinance or in the proposal. Maybe they're covered because they don't meet full cutoff. But I think it's important to use the word floodlights somewhere as a banned thing, because people will think, oh, they're allowed. They're not in the list of prohibited lights. And they may not know they don't meet a full cutoff definition. But they are listed in the Asheville ordinance as banned and in the Hendersonville one. So those are my only points on the lighting ordinance. I think it's a good revision. These are the few things I noticed I think are worth addressing. So any questions?
I have one question about floodlights. There's a business down on the river.
Oh, yeah, I know the plastic one. They got new floodlights.
Yeah,
I
and
think they're in violation, but I could be wrong.
would that be considered industrial lighting, or would that be considered flood lighting? What is that?
That's commercial or lighting, or industrial. But when I look at the current ordinance, and planning has to help me because I may file a complaint, it says it doesn't address floodlights specifically, and maybe I'm wrong, but it does address the type of fixtures you can use, and it says full cutoff or partial cutoff. Well, floodlights don't meet either of those definitions, so that would prohibit it. But it would have been better if we used the word floodlights in the ordinance, because that would have been clearer. But I think they're in violation. They're fairly new. I live in North Asheville, so I drove by them last night and I went, oh, what is that? So it's worse than a sporting field almost. It's like they're going to perform a football game there or something. So
I haven't driven completely by the complex, but it feels like they're fixed fixtures up on equipment.
up on a tall, very tall pole, 35 feet or more.
Okay.
And they're directed at an angle instead of down, they're going in toward the buildings. And I believe it's a violation. I don't know who installed it. If it's Duke Energy, shame on them, because they should know the ordinance. But I'm probably going to file some type of a petition about that being in violation.
Are we talking about Silver Line?
What?
Are we talking about Silver Line?
Yeah, silver line plastic.
It-
They do those big.
It's in the town of Woodfin.
What's that?
It's in the town of Woodfin. It's not our jurisdiction.
It is
Okay, it's not in the city of Asheville, so that's Woodfin.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
And I can only guess, as a resident and just having taken a tour of the plant about a week and a half ago, I don't know if they're permanent installations, but I would like to find out, just as a council member. They did a lot to restore buildings, and
They
some of
did.
it may be related to the amount of round-the-clock work they were doing to get back up online.
Yeah.
But it's a great point.
All right, well,
It's really great.
I will look into the town of Woodfin. Actually, years
Yeah.
ago, I was consulted for that lighting ordinance. I don't remember all the details. I haven't looked back, but I'll take a look. Thank you for pointing that out.
if we want to talk afterward, if you're still here at the end of the meeting.
What's that?
If you're still here at the end of the meeting, I'd love to talk to you offline.
Okay, yeah, because there'll be a presentation, a little more about the lighting. Yeah, so I will be here then. All right, thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Okay. Is there any other general comment, public comment? Then we will close the public comment session and move on to the presentation of the Swannanoa Small Area Plan update by the staff.
All right, let's see if I can get this. There we go. All right, so we're going to provide an update on what's been happening with the Swannanoa Small Area Plan. Oops, there we go. And as many of you know, we began work in January of this year. So we're going to go over some of the partners that we have brought in on the project, overview of the timeline, a status update on engagement, some of the gaps that we're seeing in this phase, how we're going to deal with that, and then the results of the first boundary poll that the public took, some of the concepts that the steering committee is currently working on for a policy map, the SWOT poll results, which was the second poll, their current work on creating a vision statement for the plan, and then their timeline going forward. We have a lot of different partners, but the ones that we are more officially working with is Land of Sky Regional Council as the planning consultant. We have a contract with them to assist with things like research and data analysis. They're going to be helping us look at the data from public input and from some of the studies we've been working on and identify policies and actions that we should be recommending as part of the draft plan that we take to the public. We also have a grant that was awarded to us from the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. It's $10,000 to be used towards the planning process and up to 80 hours of technical assistance from their staff. They focus specifically on conservation-based land use planning, so things like wildlife habitat, environmental conservation, so they can help us identify a lot of what's happening out in the area and what recommendations might be appropriate to bring in the polls to the public. We've also been partnering with Mountain True through the Appalachian Design Center, and they are doing the community-based planning process that is focusing on recovery actions and recovery projects. So we've been trying to share data, share information, and poll results with each other to limit how much kind of repetitive engagement we're doing, try to collaborate on meetings and make sure that we're all sharing information where we can. So those are our main partners. There's many others that we're working with in the community, but these are the three that we have a more formal relationship with. Any questions about those? Okay. This is the overall planning timeline, a really high level view. Like I said, January was when we started the process. Right now, we are kind of in the middle of public engagement for identifying vision, policies, and actions. That's the phase that we're in. That's going to last all the way into probably April of next year. We've got a lot more engagement that we need to do. We've got a lot of data crunching ahead of us to come up with the policies and actions that we will bring to the public. And that community engagement will last all the way through to the final public hearings, which we anticipate to be in August of 2026. In the yellow, you'll see existing conditions study and hazard assessment. We're just finishing up those studies, and we're going to be bringing them to the steering committee and to our technical experts as the next step for them to begin digging into, and then it'll go out to the community so they can see what kind of data we're using to inform a lot of our recommendations. So just an update on the engagement we've done so far. We've had 19 in-person events that were advertised to the community. It's about 76 or more staff hours at the events themselves. That doesn't include the preparatory time. We've got 273 subscribers to the e-newsletter, although that's probably a little higher. We haven't checked that in a couple weeks. But we had 103 individuals take the boundary poll, which was the first one, and we had almost 400 take the SWOT poll, which was the second poll. So we've been out to a number of public events. We've been trying to go to some of the community organizations, meetings, community markets where people are picking up food boxes, and some of the festivals. So we're trying to hit kind of all over the place and just get people as they are going about their daily lives, not trying to host any, static meetings where they have to take time out of their day to come to that meeting. So really trying to just pop in and get them for a couple minutes and ask them a few questions where possible. So that is the engagement we have done so far. Any questions about that? Yep.
How are you feeling about the representation you're getting from those two polls?
We're going to talk about engagement next, and we're going to go over some of the gaps that we're seeing. So we have had some good turnout at these events, but checking in on the engagement gaps is something that we build into our processes. So right now we're seeing a couple issues with the type of engagement in that we aren't able to always track who we're engaging with. So at the community markets, we did talk to a lot of Spanish-speaking people. However, because of the method of engagement, we don't have data for that. So we are missing some of the results to be able to accurately say who has participated. Because of that, we're going to do some more targeted outreach to make sure that we are reflecting Spanish speakers, other demographics, other geographic areas in the data, because that is missing. But we know that those people have had contact with us. We just don't have the data to show it. So that's a gap that we need to make up for. We also, through those two polls where we had a little bit over 500 total people, many of them do not answer the demographic questions. So 80% of the people that took the boundary poll and 43% of the people that took the SWOT poll did not answer a single demographic question. So when we look at those demographics, they are very close to matching the demographics of the census data that we have for that area. But that's based on only less than half of the people actually answering the question. So we don't actually know, we really don't know what those actual numbers are. So that is an issue that's kind of hard to overcome. And then 26% of the poll takers didn't disclose what their relationship was to Swannanoa. We don't know if they live there, if they work there, if they are just some person somewhere that found the poll and took it. So we can do a little bit more testing on that as we move into the next phases and try to find out a little bit better who we're engaging with in the community.
Shannon,
Mhm.
do you have any guesses as to why they're not responding to those demographic questions?
It could be just because of the sensitivity of that topic. They're also at the end of the poll, so it could be that people are getting tired by the time they get to the sixth question and they're like, I'm done. But demographic questions are one of the ones that are really hard to get people to answer. It's sensitive information and not everybody is comfortable giving it.
And I will say they were hard to get in the comp plan process too.
Okay.
It's a problem. It's just some people just don't want to provide that information.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
One thing that we are sure about is that the representation of individuals under the age of 26 is almost non-existent. So we have a plan to try to address all of those. The age gap is one that's a lot easier to do because we do have access to school systems, possibly Warren Wilson College, and some of the school groups. So that we know that we can get those numbers. The other ones we're working with our communications department to try to come up with a plan for the next couple of phases. The geographic gap, this is what it looks like on the map from the SWOT poll, which is the one where we had the most, almost 400 individuals. So we're looking at this to see where people are saying that they either live or work in the area. So we've got gaps kind of up in the northern area, especially northern Riceville. South of Interstate 40, there's not a lot of representation. It's pretty heavy kind of in the central and eastern part of Swannanoa. And so as we move forward, we're looking to do more events or do more engagement or outreach in those areas where we know there are residents, but we're not getting feedback from them.
What's the difference between the full circle and the open circle?
One of them is where they live and the other one is where they work. So they might not necessarily be a resident of Swannanoa, but maybe they work in those areas. And I'd have to go back and look at the data to see which color is
Okay.
which.
Just curious.
Yeah.
So is the Riceville area included in the small area plan?
It is. I'm going to show you a map of
I need
the
to
study
put that
boundaries
around there.
next.
That's right.
You're in Swannanoa and you didn't even know.
I didn't know it.
Yeah, it's historically
You're
it
in
is
trouble.
part of the township, the historic township boundaries, and so that's one of the reasons why it's been pulled into this study. But it also has some pretty significant drainage basins that feed into the Swannanoa River and can have like upstream and downstream impacts. So there's a lot of
Let me know,
reasons
I'll
why.
get you all the comments you want.
Careful what you ask.
So we are going to look at the boundaries in just a minute. This was the initial boundary poll. We asked the residents and citizens what areas they wanted us to be focusing on for our study. So the existing conditions study, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, was really about pulling data. So a lot of census data, very census heavy. And we just needed a starting point, what in general is the Swannanoa area so that we can begin looking at the data as we move into this planning process. So we had that open from May until July of this year. They were given 4 existing maps to choose from. Those were maps where we could easily pull census data. So census tracts, fire district maps, school district maps, and then the Swannanoa Township map. So the majority of the people that took that poll chose that Swannanoa Township. It is one of the larger areas, so it does include more acreage and more individuals than, say, like the fire district map, which is much smaller. So that's what we're basing our data poll from, is that map.
And just for clarification, when you say census tracts, what exactly are you referring to?
There were 2 census tracts that were largely in the Swannanoa area. And so the map that was shown to the public was of those 2 census tracts.
Are you talking U.S. Census or something different?
Like the official census tracts for that area. I think it was like 30, I don't remember what number it
But
was.
it was US Census.
They are U.S. Census
Yeah.
tracts. That's what
Mhm.
I just wanted to clarify.
Okay. And we have all of those maps if you ever want to see what those look like. And they are outlined in the existing conditions study that you'll get a copy of. So because we use that map for gathering data, we didn't have a lot of data at that time about whether it was all encompassing of what the study boundaries should be. So as we moved forward, we asked the steering committee and we asked residents to come up with the policy area, which is a little bit different. So the policy area map is where any plan policies and recommendations for actions should be applied to. So we looked at the comprehensive plan's future land use map. You all should be familiar with that. It's got the different character areas all across the county. And that is the map that you see on the left. So you might remember we had like mixed use areas, we had growth areas, conservation areas. We used that map in the Swannanoa area as our starting point to look at where was growth recommended and where were conservation areas recommended. We kind of just combined all of those into what you see as this map with the blue and the white. So the blue is all of the areas that the comprehensive plan recommended as growth areas. The steering committee took that map and had conversations about, where do we want the focus to be for resilience planning? Where do we want the focus to be on a more traditional small area plan? So where should that growth happen? What would we consider Swannanoa for this study? And that is what became of the draft policy map, which the final version looks like this. The final version being the version that we are going to take to the public for feedback. So green being the resilience area. These are areas where we want to focus on hazard mitigation, flood resilience, those types of recommendations, environmental protection. And then the orange being what would be considered more growth areas, and the highlight or focus area for the small area plan itself. So any questions on that?
So I'll just note for the planning board that if you look at the original map for the small area plans in the comprehensive plan, it showed a corridor study along 70 that looks very similar. The area looks very similar to what the Swannanoa highlight area is, but we've pulled in that resilience area because it's all the Swannanoa watershed, and that watershed has effect on what happens in Swannanoa as far as resilience, as far as flooding.
So what you were just talking about, that's just for the Swannanoa area, correct?
What do you mean?
Well, the growth corridors and the resiliency plan and all of that, that was focused in on Swannanoa.
From the comp plan from the prior
Yes.
slide? Yep, so you can kind of see this goes further outside. So this is the boundary of the policy area. And then these colored areas are the future land use recommendations. So, you've got like mixed use 1, you've got mixed use 2, mixed use neighborhood, rural community, and we just pulled out the growth areas, the areas that aren't green,
Right.
as our starting place. But the focus really is on that main corridor. It really is not, this plan is not going to be doing a deep dive into like those more rural Riceville communities and into some of those coves that are further to the south. So this is what it looks like when you see that highlight area. It's primarily places that have access to public water and sewer, really close to the transportation corridor. A lot of the steep slope overlays have been pulled out of that so that we're not trying to do detailed planning in, hazard areas. But we'll be taking this to the public, and in December, they'll be doing design workshops using this map as kind of the boundaries to help focus some really specific questions that we're going to be asking.
Well, and I guess my underlying question is, so are we going to be looking at, or have we already, which time-wise, I doubt you've had time, to look at the whole county in terms of what went into the 2043 comprehensive plan, how the resiliency and all of that stuff, would any of that be changed since then?
So just a reminder that we will periodically do updates to the comprehensive plan, and I have no doubt in my mind that the next update will probably focus on resiliency and those issues created by flooding and storms and that sort of thing.
Okay, thanks.
On this particular map, there's some gray area. What does that represent?
Those are the incorporated areas. So Montreat up to the top right, town of Black Mountain is to the east, and then it's city of Asheville to the west.
And then also on this map, there seems to be like some traces of like gold color. What is that?
Are you looking at, where's my cursor? Kind of like these
To the bottom left, maybe.
all in there.
Yeah.
So those are actually property lines. And in creating this map, we had to look at a variety of things to help set the boundaries. So property lines was one of the things we looked at, but we also looked at topography. So ridge crests are like a great way to cut some lines, just because it kind of divides those drainage areas and makes things a little bit cleaner to talk about impacts. But major roadways were also used as dividing lines in some cases.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we move on? No? Okay. So the second poll was the SWOT analysis. That's an analysis of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, which is a really common thing that you do as part of this kind of planning process. And that was those 397 people that took the poll. We asked a whole bunch of questions. I've only given you some of the highlights from that here, but we have all the data if you wanted to, dig into what those results were. one of the most important questions we asked was about risk tolerance. So 72% of the people said that they wanted the county to make major changes in Swannanoa to prepare for future disasters. And then another 26% were comfortable with moderate changes. So we are framing it in kind of like a minor, moderate, and major terminology as we're talking about what the county can do and what level people are comfortable with. And so that was the first question. And in the next phase of engagement, we're going to come back with some testing to see if, with some really specific examples to see if people really did mean they want major changes or if they're more on the moderate side. But that was the first question for that type of risk assessment. We also asked them what the top 5 things were to build resilience over the next 5 to 20 years. Creating early warning systems was high up on that list. Parks and recreation is always at the top of the list. 47% said that was the top 5 desire. And then things like creating safer roads and bridges, protecting wetlands, strengthening stormwater rules. Those all made up that top 5 list for resilience. So that helps our staff focus in on some of the policy recommendations that we can bring in future phases for them to look through and just to see kind of what they want us to be focusing on. Any questions about that? Okay. So right now, the steering committee is working on creating a vision statement, which is a very high level statement of aspirations for that plan document. In the comprehensive plan, we had a number of vision statements, but for the small area plans, they'll typically just have one concise statement that represents what the plan is all about. And the steering committee is looking at the results of that SWOT analysis of what the public is saying that they want to be focusing on. They looked at the themes that our consultant helped pull out of that data. We're talking about the risk tolerance level, that 72% of people that wanted major changes, and then also referencing the vision themes from the comprehensive plan to make sure that we are in line with what we've adopted as a county as a whole. So at tonight's meeting, the steering committee is going to be brainstorming some vision statement options. They're going to come up with 3, and then we'll be taking those to the public to vote on. So there'll be some work happening tonight on that, and then we'll be opening up the 3rd public poll to talk not just about the vision statement, but also about that policy map. So they'll have a couple things to provide feedback on. This is the remaining steering committee timeline for the rest of this year. They are going to go all the way through August of next year, but we haven't set those dates yet. So tonight we'll have that vision statement workshop with the committee. November 10th, they'll be preparing with us for the design workshops. That'll happen in December. And then in December, we'll be getting back together with them on the 15th to do more work as we head into the new year. And that is my update for that.
Very good.
Any questions? Okay.
Yes,
One-
thank
one-
you.
One quick question.
Yeah.
Duke Power is doing like some resiliency work in the north part of Buncombe County. They've identified 4 areas where they're actually doing some major changes for future storms and all that. Do they consult with you on that, or do y'all talk with them about that, or is there much communication, or do y'all leave that to Duke Power to do their own work?
We have engaged with them through the Technical Expertise Committee and requested some feedback from them. And then one thing the Technical Expertise Committee is going to help us do is come up with draft policies and actions. So they would hopefully be a part of that workshop and provide us with some feedback that way.
Thank you.
Okay. Then I guess we are ready to move on to the last item on our agenda for discussion, which is a workshop on ZPH 2025-00024, which is the lighting text amendment. So.
All right. So At your last meeting, we went through this PowerPoint where we did kind of a lighting 101 overview. A lot of people that are here today were not able to go through that. And I think you got a copy of it in your packet. I'm just curious, did everyone get a chance to look at that? Because I would like to go back through that presentation really fast, just in case there's any questions. But I don't want to bore you if you all dug into it really deeply. Is there any consensus on that we can maybe just go through it really quick one more time? Okay,
Yeah.
great. So we'll talk real quick about the purpose of making these amendments to the lighting ordinance, Little Lighting 101, the impact analysis, what we looked at from some of the other jurisdictions, our current county ordinances for lighting, and then what those proposed text amendments are for. And then today's meeting was really to go line by line through the the amended version of it, and you all have a paper copy of that. We'll pull up a version on the screen too. So real quick, the purpose of this text amendment is to address exterior commercial lighting standards to minimize light pollution, reduce light trespass and glare, and promote energy efficient practices. We are going to talk about a lot of standards, so things like cutoff types, non-cutoff lighting versus full cutoff lighting, and that really has to do with the direction that lighting is being sent to, whether it's oriented upwards, if it is lighting what it's intended to light, or if it's causing glare or light trespass into areas that it wasn't intended to light. We'll also talk about color temperature, which is the Kelvin rating. So 1,000 Kelvin being more on the warm, the red orange side, 10,000 Kelvin, the higher numbers being on the bluer side. And there's a lot of research about the health and environmental impacts of lighting, how it can mess up our circadian rhythms. It can cause glare. It can cause traffic accidents if it is not planned for properly. We will also go through a number of different types of lighting standards. So different types of electronic message displays, pylon signs, backlit signs, just different impacts for different types of lighting, different ways that the bulbs are either housed in the lighting sign itself or shining onto it can make a difference in how the community experiences that light. And these are some of the things you'll see in the ordinance. So facade lighting is a lighting of the structure itself rather than of a walkway or of a space that people would be in. Accent lighting you'll see typically in like a landscape application to light up the trees or a pretty fountain or statue. Some of the more historic areas might have ornamental gas flame lamps or other types of non-traditional lighting. And then wall packs and pole lights are what we typically see in development. So wall packs being cutoff lighting that's attached to the building, pole lights, what you'll see along a roadway or in a parking lot most typically. Foot candles is the measurement of light at any given point. So these are the diagrams that our staff uses when reviewing a lighting plan to figure out whether light is staying where it needs to be, preventing it from encroaching too much onto a neighboring property. And these photometric plans are really the basis for our lighting plan review. So we'll look at things like the average for the entire development area, the average for the parking lot, and then what the levels are at the property lines. So that's how we use those photometric plans. Glare and light pollution are two of the reasons why we regulate lighting to prevent impacts to neighboring properties, especially when you have commercial properties right next to residential areas. And as the county continues to grow, that will continue to become an issue as we have some of those conflicts between uses. And this is like a really good example. I know everyone here has been driving at night and you've experienced glare. It's hard to describe what it is, but when you see it, you know that's what we're talking about. So for the impact analysis, light pollution exposure has negative mental and physical impacts to humans. This is well researched and documented. It can be harmful to wildlife and plants. It can be harmful to ecosystems. And non-white communities and renters are typically in the literature impacted by light pollution at a higher rate than white communities. A lot of that has to do with past practices in land use and where those types of communities typically live, which can be in closer proximity to industrial and commercial sites where those types of lights will cause more negative impacts. Lighting pollution is an environmental justice issue because it disproportionately impacts communities of color and lower socioeconomic households. So lots of different reasons. There's widespread kind of general public reasons why we want to keep lighting healthy. And then there's also kind of those disproportionate impacts that we keep in mind. We looked at a lot of other jurisdictions. These are some of the examples. Just looking at their ordinances and seeing what types of things that they were had standards for. So we looked at the city of Asheville, Henderson County, Chatham County, and a lot of them will use bug ratings. Some of them are regulating similar to how we are with the Kelvin and photometric or foot candle limits. It's kind of all over the place with whether there are more or less restrictive standards. So we're trying to pick the ones that seem like they will address issues that we know are part of our community, and kind of fill in some of the gaps that we see in our ordinance that we've had problems with. So I'm not going to go through this summary. This is a summary of the proposed text amendments, and we won't go through this because we're going to just go line by line through that whole ordinance and see what each of those proposed changes are. But are there any other? Oh, we got one more. Yep. So before we move on, the comprehensive plan lays out specific goals for us to be implementing over the next 20 years. And as each one of these text amendments comes to you, we're pulling out some of those actions and policies that are related to the text amendments. So for growth, equity, and conservation, we've got protecting agricultural and forest lands, environmentally sensitive areas, and rural communities. That's one of the big reasons why we're looking at kind of the rural and urban divide when we're talking about the lighting ordinance. Policy 2 and 3 from Farms and Forests is also about preserving natural heritage and ecosystem enhancement. When we get into health and recreation, Policy 5 is about environmental protection and land conservation measures specifically to promote health. And then infrastructure and energy in Action 2, it's about implementing policies that advance decarbonization and sustainability goals. So that's where some of these lighting text amendments can help with energy use. Any questions about that?
Can I add in that one of the goals also is affordability? How will this ordinance impact cost to develop or something like that?
So we do not require any lighting from the zoning perspective. Building code, of course, there are some safety lighting requirements. They're pretty minimal in terms of exterior requirements, but there are no requirements in our ordinance that a commercial development has to install any lighting. If they choose to install lighting, the types of requirements that we have are about the fixture types that they choose, the color temperatures. These are not things that are going to necessarily increase cost. It's just going to kind of direct what types of fixtures they would be able to choose from. And Duke provides all of these types of fixtures as part of their normal packages. So we're not asking them to get anything that they would have to get custom ordered or special ordered as part of their design. Now, if it's a historic development and they want to do something really fancy with some type of fixture that is not special order and they need to still make it a full cutoff design, then that could be something that they'd have to go above and beyond to meet the requirement. But just for a normal commercial development, they're going to have lots of options because this is a standard practice in most places.
So there wouldn't be any special professional plans, anything like that might be above and beyond what is currently required?
Nothing that's being proposed is going to change the permitting requirements that they have to go through or what they have to submit in order to have a review done. And in fact, as we'll go over it when we go through the text amendment, we've actually built in some options for developers that if they keep their lighting below a certain threshold, they actually would not have to do a photometric plan, which can be one of the more costly engineered documents that they'd have to submit. So we're trying to find ways to reduce costs, especially for smaller commercial developers who are, just trying to either break into the community or are not having as big of an impact to not have that cost associated with
That
the
was one of my
submittal.
concerns, so thank you.
Yeah, we've got some really cool stuff in here that we'll walk you through and see what you think about that. So if you're all ready, we can begin going through the document.
Shannon, if I can ask quickly, are you gonna, as a portion of your presentation, are you gonna go over the questions or less, I'll say comments that were made during our last non-meeting, and give answers back to those, or should we raise those questions again with you?
Are you talking about the Kelvin?
There was the Kelvin that came up, and then I'd also asked about how does this fit within the prohibition on downzoning
Gotcha.
and non-conforming uses?
So for the Kelvin rating, we'll discuss that when we're discussing the language itself for the downzoning law that is currently active. We are internally plan to discuss that with legal and make a decision about what the best option for us to move forward is, as far as upcoming text amendments and how they relate to that downzoning law. We got some good information at the NCAPA conference last week, and we will internally discuss how to move forward, but we won't schedule the public hearing for you guys for this one until we've made that decision.
All right, I'm gonna just make this a little bit bigger because it's really small. So you all have a paper copy of this. This is version 1 of the exterior lighting ordinance. And it starts at section 78.581 in the definitions. Jillian, should we read through each one individually? Is that how we usually do this?
We sort of go like we do section 78.581. Does anyone have any questions,
I'll do like that.
changes, or want to discuss?
Okay. You don't have to listen to me talk for the whole meeting. So I'll give you all a moment to read through those 3 new definitions. If it is red and underlined, it's an addition. If it's red and strike through, that means it was something that was already in the ordinance that we are deleting.
So there are other definitions other than these 3.
Yes, we're only showing you changes. This is not the entire ordinance.
Is there a definition for vehicular canopy in the original document?
We'll pull that up.
Check.
Shannon,
Yes.
quick question on the facade lighting definition.
Mhm.
It includes, or the term says it, that are attached and pointing at the structure.
Mhm.
What came to me is that you could have detached facade lighting, and
Mhm.
are you intending to include detached lighting that would do the same thing as the attached?
They're kind of well lighted ground,
Sure.
shining up on the wall.
Exactly. That wouldn't be technically attached, and if your intent is to encompass
Would
it all.
End up being an accent light. So the way it's currently written is if it's not attached to the building, it would fall under the accent lighting definition.
Okay.
And just to answer your question, we do have a vehicular canopy definition.
Yep.
In the ordinance right now, and I can read that out loud.
Is
No,
there
it's
any?
okay.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
And just one quick thing, just because I don't have the full ordinance in front of me, is there a definition for EMDs in there as well?
So that's one that we're adding.
Okay.
That's going to be a new one that we
Oh,
have
yep,
not
there
had
it is.
specific standards for until this
My
amendment.
bad. It's right there, sorry.
Any thoughts, any questions on those three? Move along? Okay. So the next section is 78,668, which is the lighting standards. We have an edit to the purpose statement and then a couple little edits to applicability. So we'll just start with A and B first before we get down into the other ones. Any questions on those top two paragraphs?
On B, with the addition of the pre-existing, the way I would read that would mean that the pre-existing dusk to dawn utility and security lights would not be considered nonconformities. They would have to come within compliance.
So we, in the current ordinance, dusk to dawn utility lights were phased out about 10 years ago. They were no longer prohibited. So,
Permitted.
and there is we're going to get down to that pre-existing dusk to dawn because there's a picture that we're going to add about what that specifically applies to. It's not all security lights. It's something very specific that was the metal halide or high pressure sodium light fixtures that you used to see on like a barn. And the intent of the ordinance was originally to phase those out. And that has since come and gone. So in theory, there are no more in the county. Of course, there's always something somewhere, but we're at a point in it being about a decade since they were phased out on paper. And so we need to update that wording to reflect that they're just not permitted anymore.
Okay, so if they were out there, they would be prohibited, not allowed as nonconformities going
Yes,
forward.
there was a period of time where they were expected to be taken down and not replaced with the same type of fixture. Any thoughts?
Just a quick question on B1.
Okay.
Exceeding 50% of the value of the structure. Does this, do we get into a look back period the way you would with structures on this? In other words, somebody could replace up to 49% this year and then 49% the next year and never have to be in compliance.
How would that work with the permitting? I mean, we typically don't look at the value from prior permits. I don't know that we have a way to do that in our current processes. If it were a large development where we are tracking through a master plan permit, that could become the situation. But for something smaller that's just making changes over time, I don't know that that would come up.
Thank you.
And just a quick question about motion detection lights. Are they preferred or not preferred? Do they impact wildlife?
So motion detection is preferred. I don't remember where we landed in the recommendations. It's really hard for staff to be able to verify that, especially for ongoing enforcement. So there's certainly benefits for motion detection, but I don't remember where we landed. We're going to get to that further on in this ordinance, and I'll have to see what the recommendation was.
I want to make sure I understood your answer to the previous question. So here, if I understood what you were asking, let's say you have 10 lights within that vehicular canopy.
Mm-hmm.
What they could do is go in and replace, and assuming that 3 or whatever number didn't cross the 50% threshold,
Mm-hmm.
they could go in and do 3 this year, 3 next year, 3 the following year. and avoid compliance
They
the
could.
way that it's written.
These are typically big gas station management companies, though, and they are coming in with a package to replace the wrap and the underside of the canopy all in one go. I personally have never seen them kind of piecemeal it. I don't think that that's usually how they do those projects. but-
I would say, I've never seen one where they've replaced 3 lights.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I guess I'm
that
thinking more along the
situation.
lines of, yeah, your high-end gas stations, they come in, they replace the entire thing. I'm talking about more of that are independently owned, not
Mhm.
part of a, series or ownership package that comes and does this, and whether you have any concerns about that.
So as we get further into this amendment, you'll see we do have some other provisions about gas station canopies. Even if they're not required to replace everything at the 50% threshold, they still have to show that the new lights that they are adding do not create an additional, or they don't exceed any nonconformities that are on the site already. Most gas stations, I will say a high number of gas stations are not in compliance with current lighting ordinances. And we do struggle with how to review their lighting plans. So we've added some options to give to them where if they can't meet the ordinance, they have some options. But we are still looking to make sure they're not increasing their lighting impact as they're swapping out lights, even if they're not having to replace the whole system.
Yeah, I get they couldn't expand the nonconformity, but
Mhm.
it wouldn't necessarily require them to come into compliance.
The way it's written right now, that would be the effect. Yeah.
Why do we have that here? If it seems to create some confusion, I'm just curious the rationale for including that. That exceeds 50% of the value.
That's a standard that we have in a lot of different places in the ordinance. We're actually really not making any changes to that item, but it's the threshold where we set up the expectation that now they do need to bring the site into compliance. But in terms of the gas stations,
So it's a standard for a lot of non-conforming uses where it like if you exceed 50% of what is
it's the structure. That's the thing
value of the
is
structure.
they don't typically exceed it though. That's the problem.
Yeah,
With
I
the
mean,
lighting change, they don't typically exceed it.
and I guess that's the point in saying, do we really want it to be this way in
Mhm.
order to achieve compliance when, and I think structure, and I hadn't had a chance to go back to the definition in the broader section. In this context, when I read vehicular cameras renovated at a cost that exceeds 50% of the value of the structure or is replaced in its entirety. Now, structure in that context, meaning the vehicular canopy
Yes.
structure, not
Mhm.
the lighting structures, which are really not structures, or the overall, say, where you walk in
The
to
retail
the gas
space.
station, the retail
Mm-mm.
space. If they're always not, if it's never going to cross that threshold, then you're never going to get compliance with
Mhm.
this the way that it's written.
Yeah.
So I think it goes into the broader conversation about whether this kind of nonconformity can be balanced with what the downzoning limitation is.
Mhm.
But I would prefer to see us take the 50% out or put it on a timeline, kind of like what you did with the down there on C. the
A
cutoff.
phase out
A phase
period.
out period, so that you're actually getting to compliance.
I have to comment on that. About every 3 or 4 years, the major branded oil companies want to change the look on their canopies. A lot of it is decal type work, things unrelated to the structure. That while in most cases that work is not going to cost in excess of 50%, I don't know that you ought to open Pandora's box and say, all right, just because you're changing the decals on the canopy, we want all this other stuff done.
If they change just the face and not the equipment, not the lighting inside, they can swap out the advertising. It's when the bulbs, the fixtures that are inside of those backlit panels are replaced. That's when it triggers having to meet the standards, if that helps.
So only the fixtures.
Only the fixtures. We don't regulate any signs in Buncombe County. We only regulate the lighting.
Should the language then reflect more specifics about that? Vehicular canopy is kind of a broad term.
Mhm.
I'm also a little concerned about enforcement of this kind of thing, but to the point, if what we're really talking about is replacing the fixtures, maybe the language should reflect that.
So can you tell me a little bit more about what you would want to see? Are you proposing that? What would the proposal be?
I don't know what Ken's proposal would be, but I would say, one, maybe it's worth defining vehicular canopy, maybe. And that will then
So we-
provide certainty. But you may not need to do that either to get
So
where
we
you're going.
do define vehicular canopy in the ordinance.
So if it's in there, perfect. So you know exactly what you're talking about. And I would say let's put in a phased timeline on this to kind of Carl's point in saying, one, then you'll have a period of time within which you know you will have to do this work. It allows independent or chain type commercial operation to know exactly how much time they have to deal with the situation.
So in general, the county has tried to stay away from those timelines of bringing things into compliance and really balancing what these ordinance regulate with how they affect business owners. So it is very difficult to say to every gas station in the county, which the majority of them don't meet our standards, that in 5-10 years, you're going to have to rip out all your lights and replace them.
Well, I guess that's a policy choice. And those type of lighting environments are one of the ones that I think we get to hear a lot about because of the amount of lighting that's coming off of them. So it would seem to me that I don't know why it would be unreasonable to say 10 years. You know, that particularly if you have these happening at least through refreshes on the 3 to 5 year time frame, that's more than enough time to coincide with other work that's typically being done on the stations. And I'm flexible, at least this is what I'm personally asking for. Whether it's 7 or 5 or 10 or whatever it is, it just doesn't seem that the 50% standard that's in there ever requires compliance. And if that's the point, and again, the purpose of a zoning ordinance in general is to take nonconformities and convert them into conformities. There should be some type of standard within a period of time that would do that for these type of uses.
We've got a vehicular canopy section. When we get to that, maybe we can hash out some more of like what that could look like.
One quick thing. Under B1, where it says when a vehicular canopy is renovated at a cost which exceeds 50% of the value of the structure, can we take structure out and again put vehicular canopy in there? I think it makes some clarity.
Oops, you don't have a pen?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
I would caution against amortizing those things, because if you're going to do it in one instance, why not anything within the ordinance? You're kind of picking and choosing, and parking lot lighting may be as offensive as canopy lighting, something like that. So
And as a general policy, again, I will say the county has shied away from amortization because it is a burden on business owners.
And I just, an aside, I don't know that you can buy those metal halide lights anymore that you see. If we end up having to replace them, we end up with the newer LED recessed type fixtures.
And adding that photo is really to clarify, because some people see security light and they think, oh, any floodlight is banned. And that specific type of lighting was the purpose of that phase out period. So we just want to add an image so that it's really clear what that intent was. Are there any other questions about B1, 2, or 3?
Why'd you take out the time frame?
The time
That said
frame?
that within 5 years of the day the section was adopted.
Because that was 10 years ago. So we are so far beyond that it's just done. There's no longer a 5-year window because it has expired.
I think as
Does
you
that make
said, they're
sense?
just now prohibited.
They're just
period.
now prohibited. About 10 years ago, they were all supposed to be gone. If that tells you how long ago it has been since we updated this.
And this is an example of amortization.
Yes,
That essentially
the
says we
only
wanna
example.
Stop doing this.
Mhm.
And then we want.
So it's the
site
only
litigation.
example of amortization, and it was extremely difficult and time consuming for staff. And we got a lot of pushback from the public.
But it worked.
It did work.
Just wasn't fun.
It's hard to say if it worked because of the amortization or because the technology had moved on. In this case.
And a lot
Probably
of
both.
a lot of those lights are installed by Duke, and Duke changed the lights they installed based on what. the
That's a
ordinance
fair
said.
question too, in that there are alternatives that are readily available in the market for the canopy type lighting that would allow that. This isn't a
Yes.
situation where
It's
they
a
don't have another
price.
option.
Yeah, it's the price to replace them when you are kind of mid-use and not wanting to have to take on that expense.
Thanks.
Out of quick curiosity, do they still manufacture these metal halide high pressure sodium lights?
I don't know. No
Don't know.
idea.
Are they available? I mean,
I do not know.
Just a general question I think may have relevance throughout. When you do something like an amortization and you are placing a burden on the business, what kind of resistance do we get from the General Assembly and other statutes on stuff like that?
So in general, the General Assembly does not like amortization.
That's what I thought.
But to be clear, that is an accepted tool within the land use and planning context to deal with uses and structures. And it is provided and explicitly provided for in the general statutes, correct?
That is correct,
Okay.
but as we all know, given our discussion about the upzoning bill, those bills can easily change and easily be triggered by communities' changes to ordinances.
Are we ready to move on to section, where were we on? D or B1? No. I think my numbering's off. B1C is where we're at. So maybe 1 through 8, if you want to read through those, and questions or comments.
just a quick question. Is there a definition in the existing ordinance as to seasonal displays?
That I don't believe. Can you double check on that one? I don't think so.
Okay. Would that be helpful or not helpful?
For commercial seasonal displays?
I don't know. I'm just thinking of Christmas lights and I'm just wondering if we should define that or not define that.
We usually don't get complaints about Christmas lights and it's temporary use. So, I mean, that's something you can discuss as a board, but the staff doesn't see it as a problem. And like I said, we don't have complaints about it.
It's really the Halloween lights that are most troublesome.
I do think it might be worth considering. I mean, when storefronts, externally facing storefronts put up lighting that could distract migratory birds, tends to happen around the same time of year.
So you said there's no definition of seasonal display?
This is where Jillian and I might find common ground on when you start coming for the seasonal lighting, when you start doing certain things that then raise the profile of what you're doing in a way that gets people concerned and then detracts from the overall goal. That's kind of why I'm probably fine with not touching the seasonal lighting and the other things like that to try and get more progress on the things we really care about, which may or may not be the canopy lighting or may not be some of these other things. So I do think it's worth us thinking about all the different stuff we touch and whether it's worth it.
I have no problem with no definition so long as staff is good with it. I was just inquiring because we don't have the existing ordinance in front of us.
I would suggest I would agree with John and say it sometimes, there are some things that it may not be worth the fight to touch.
Question on item 6. You talk about temporary lighting for public purposes. Say someone doing a private development of some type, would they need to get a permit for construction lighting?
How do we deal with construction lighting? Do you know?
I think that would go under 5, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I'd have to look into that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how we deal
Maybe
with that.
Something to just look at if we should say for public and private purposes in some way, just.
So really the question is, do we have specific standards for temporary construction, construction lighting that is for private use? From what I have reviewed in the past, they bring out the rollaway pole lights, and they're always full cutoff. I haven't had a specific situation where they were proposing non-compliant construction lighting, but maybe someone else has.
No. And so D1, which is prohibition, says searchlights, laser source lights, or any other similar high-intensity lights, except permitted in advance as required by subsection F5 to be used as a temporary basis. So the temporary lighting, which does not utilize those types described in D1, I think that's where it fits.
So you're saying as long as they're not using searchlights, laser lights, or high-intensity lights, then if they are temporary, they would fall under the exemption. Okay.
Like in the prohibitions, like lighting that is oriented upward.
Is there a definition for high-intensity lighting?
No, but we'd probably go for the dictionary definition of high in intensity at that point. So if it's not defined by the ordinance, you look at the dictionary definition, which is why we don't define everything.
All right, we're still on 1 through 8. Any questions about 7 and 8?
Number 8, being in the business, most landscape lights point up, like trees, fountains. How, is there another place where you get in the weeds about that, or can't be seen from the road, or?
So the way
or
that
how deep should that go into a deeper dive there?
Yeah, the way that everything is laid out currently, part of the problem that we're having is we are getting commercial developments, especially some of the apartment complexes where they've got lots of uplighting into the trees. And because we do not have anything in the ordinance now about ornamental landscape lighting, we've been having to deny those applications because they don't fit into any of the allowed uses. So number 8 is adding an allowance so that if your ornamental landscape lighting is below a certain voltage, it'll be exempt and you could do it. But that means,
Light bulb is
yeah, but
what
that
the bright
means,
lights are in your car are. They're bright.
so currently there's nothing in the ordinance and there's nothing in the proposal that would allow higher intensity uplighting into trees or other vegetation.
So Jay, are you saying it's too high or too low?
What I'm saying is that landscape lighting, we hang lights from trees. Most lights point up into structures to illuminate branches or whatnot, and those lights can be pretty bright.
Yeah.
So the ordinance is this saying that if I want to do any of that, they just have to be 25 lumens or less.
That's the way it's currently written. If you
other
want
than
to
that,
point
no.
them up, then they'd have to be 25 or less. If you hang them from above and point them down into landscaping, then you could do it based on the regular limits for full or partial cutoff, lumen rating, whatever that may be, that would apply. But if you want to
25
point
is
it
the
up, it would
standard.
have to be under 25.
25 watt bulbs are pretty standard. 12 and a half are now, since LEDs, they are wattages come down, which is wattage of lumens, not the same thing.
Mhm.
I was just curious how, because it gets pretty intricate.
This also says a suspended string of lights consisting of individual lamps larger than 45 lumens for LEDs or 25 lumens for incandescent bulbs, so this only applies to string light versus if you had mounted like a single light that was shining up to illuminate.
So
Is
it
that-
could be both ornamental landscape lighting that is like attached to the ground. It also applies to permanently installed string lights, so not seasonal. We've seen some commercial developments with really high intensity string lights. And what this is saying is that those lights are to be directed downward. For example, they would be purchasing the string lights that have the small shield above. And that it would not exceed a certain lumen per light bulb. For
on the string lights? Otherwise, it's on the singular lights. That's number 2.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's talking about the single light bulb for string lights. Is that something that we need to clarify more?
Well,
in
that's
that?
what I was trying, when I was hearing what Jay was saying, what was popping into my mind are those situations where you have a single, let's say, large light like this that can either be shown up
Mhm.
or shown down. It's not part of a string of lights. And then there are string lights that are different from that are used for illumination purposes, seasonally
Typically
or
called
otherwise.
bistro lights.
What'd you call those, Jay?
They're typically called bistro lights when you have the string of light
Mhm.
bulbs. That outdoor courtyard heating.
Because I hear you wanting to address both, those that just shine up into the canopy of a tree in order to light it up at night,
Mhm.
and those that are part of a string. And I would see those as different.
Okay. So we can separate that out. Good catch on that one. Any other questions about section C? All right, moving on to prohibitions, section D, 1 through 5.
I'm reading number 5 several times to say, what about animated signs that are seasonal? Y'all would interpret that as falling under the seasonal exemption?
Would that be, would that,
Like
could that fall
Merry
under the
Christmas,
exemption?
Happy Hanukkah, Happy Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
Let me read the exemption. Yeah. As long as it was at a low wattage bulb.
I was talking about lighting, so it wouldn't be a low wattage bulb though.
So
I mean,
maybe-
it could be under 5. But it's not really clear.
Do you want us to clarify that in exemptions?
I would just want to make sure y'all were feeling that those kind of signs would fall under the seasonal exemption of we are not making you take down your Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas.
So that was the intention, but I think it needs to be clarified in those exemptions, so we'll add some language.
This isn't addressed in E12.
Ken, did you ask a question?
I'm
Is
looking
this
at E12.
not, is that addressed in any way under section E12?
I saw
Reference
E12 as
there?
more of the outdoor here again, baseball field sort of
Okay.
stuff. I didn't see seasonal. I think it's just kind of an interpretation thing. You could easily say, well, it's a seasonal type thing, and so we're going to exempt it. But if we're clear about it, then no one has to worry about it.
Okay.
The difference between an animated sign and EMD is? EMD is a billboard.
So in the EMD section, there are limits on how quickly and how often the message can change. So it's about it's pretty much about preventing TV screens on the side of the road that are causing distractions for drivers. So it's
That's what
not
an
that,
animated sign would be.
yeah, it's not, an EMD would be more of a static image. So maybe you have a dentist's office and, they change the message every other day or something. That's not creating like a live, a live, distraction that's causing changes every couple seconds and people are watching it like it's a television screen. The animated signs, you've got someone dancing, you've got something changing constantly. It's creating a hazard if it is directed towards people on the road. So we're trying to distinguish between changeable copy signs versus these animated things that are more like television screens. Does that make sense?
And just for clarity, because I'm not certain, I think I followed what you said. But if you take a TV and you put it like a USB into it and you turn it into a sign that maybe contains video content or flashing or whatever, is that regulated by this or?
That'd be considered an animated sign.
Okay.
But if they have a static message on it and they, change it every other day with a new message or a new advertisement, that wouldn't be considered animated. They would just be changing out their advertising.
So a series of fixed pictures that change on their
Yes.
faces are different than an animated sign.
Yes.
Okay.
Animated would be movement in the advertising.
Single picture movement within
Yes.
it.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So if you don't use the animation, you can actually put an outdoor TV up and use it in that context?
Yeah, because it's not about the content, it's about the motion. So we are not telling you what type of equipment. What we're saying is that if you look at section E12, which we'll get to, that's where we talk about kind of what that distinction is between electronic message display, how much that message can change, how often that determines whether it would be considered animated or not animated.
Thank you.
So when we get to that section, maybe there's some things we'll need to clarify to make sure that it's really clear.
And that's visible off the premises, is that right?
Visible from the road is typically what the intent is. I think too, in section E12, there's a provision that if it's interior to a development, for instance, like if you walked into the outlet malls and you were walking through the stores and maybe they had a display screen, we're not regulating that. That's not visible from the road. That's intended for the people in the development who are on foot. So that's not something that we would be regulating.
Do you regulate billboards?
We do not have,
Is
are they
that part of
prohibited
this
in this ordinance?
Statute.
So we have limits on the height of signs that are lit, but we don't have any regulations on unlit
The ones
signs.
that change pictures.
Yeah.
There are
Well, those aren't animated as much as.
pretty sure there's a state statute on the regulation of those animated ones from within the DOT
The
right of
billboards,
way.
yeah.
And that
So
almost
numbers.
preempt, if I'm recalling correctly, further regulation of the,
Yeah, we don't
But-
regulate
No-
anything
no
that's on the
jurisdiction.
highway.
Well, it's lights. So.
Yeah.
DOT gets to see what we're seeing when we're driving on the road, I guess.
But what we are regulating is kind of a safety aspect, correct?
Correct. Health and safety is the purpose of the lighting ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we will move on unless there's any further questions. Section E, lighting specifications. This is where we get into specific standards that we would be reviewing as part of a permit application. So let's do A, B, and C first.
One question about the little chart there.
Mhm.
Based on the speaker who spoke earlier, is it possible to expand that chart to have location, max foot candle, and then also a column for lumens? Or does lumens and foot candles not always match up? I'm not sure.
So
No.
I had my understanding of lumens is that is the measure from what is exiting the light, meaning that is what is being
That's
put
correct.
out. And foot candles are what you would measure when you're standing at a particular place for how much light is reaching that particular spot, like a
Correct.
property line. And my question was, or follow up on yours, is to play off the feedback we got. Is there a way to correlate lumens that are exiting over a particular distance with an anticipated foot candle? That would allow for us to have one process that says if you pick lumens of this, we're not going to require you to show the foot candles as like a default, and that you can just go to the store, pick up the lumens, no studies required, do that. But as an alternative to say, well, let's say you're using a lumen and yet you want to use landscaping, that would then prevent that light from actually reaching the property line, that you could have an alternative pathway based on site design that would let you pick foot candles if that's what you wanted to do.
That would be, so first, for your question, lumens and foot candles is really different. I think you explained it well. The intensity of that light versus the spread of the light is kind of what we're looking at. When we spoke to the lighting engineers at Duke, because we are not lighting engineers, so we talked to them about some of the lumen questions. We actually had proposed a lumen table in here originally. When we met with Duke's lighting engineers, their perspective was that if we're already doing foot candles and Kelvin ratings and height limits, that is getting to where we want to be in terms of understanding the impact of those lights. Adding lumens was not going to necessarily give us more information or better information, so we would want to choose one or the other. In our experience, our staff is familiar with foot candles. It's worked well. We haven't had a lot of complaints about impacts when we do enforce that correctly. So to change to lumens, we would probably have to just choose one or the other. I don't know that there is a benefit to doing both, but it is interesting, your question about could we allow them to
I
choose.
was just wondering if there's a way that would allow for a default non-plan option. Like I could just pick this one and be done.
We have a default non-plan option in here based on type of lights and number of lights.
So earlier I had mentioned a new provision where if you're under a certain number of lights and certain type, we would waive your photometric plan requirement. So when we get to that, maybe there's ways you would want to build that option out.
And I read that one. I think it's a great one because it incentivizes people to use less lighting. Like if you come under this, you get to exempt yourself. I was just trying to be responsive to the feedback we got that might also obviate the need for a plan on someone who says, no, I actually need the lighting that I need. But if I just go and grab this from the lumen category, I don't need to do a plan that would show what it would look like over here. I think it needs some thought, but.
Well, and I also think there is some merit. I mean, I had no idea what a foot candle was, but I do understand lumens.
Okay.
And I feel like that's probably the general public. So that's my only question. I get the point that Duke was making, but if you're just the general public and you're reading this, where does the general public read this? I mean,
I think ultimately we care about foot candles because that's what's leaving the property. Like, what is that pollution element? But is there a simpler way to get to there?
And just to be fair, the people that are submitting these permits are typically lighting engineers, but it would be nice if the public could understand kind of what the impact is we're talking about. We would have to consult with a lighting engineer to do something like that.
And I think that kind of goes to my original point, which was, can you have a second column that says max foot candle or up to so many lumens, which would be.
I don't think that'll work because you could have trees. Many things in the way that are reducing the lumen, and the only way to measure that is by a foot candle. Not
That's
by a lumen.
The closeness of different, like if they had a lumen rating and they had poles closer together or farther together, also we wouldn't have any way without that photometric plan to know what the kind of the impact is of the distance. I still think we would probably need both. I don't know if we could get away with just allowing lumens unless it was in that situation where they had fewer lights and they were meeting that 250-foot distance between poles, and we can get into all that when we get to that section.
Engineers, I'm not sure you can measure lumens from
Yeah.
once it leaves the fixture.
Mm.
And
also-
it starts
Yeah, I don't know.
dissipating.
Ultimately, if you use foot candles, it will allow for larger lumen height lighting further in if you used site design as a way of limiting the exit of that light at the property line. So, yeah,
So are we good with sticking with foot candles?
I'm good. I just wanted to, people, not a lot of people, but folks come to hear these things.
So C is C table. Oh, we don't have it numbered yet, but the maximum foot candle table. Sorry, it's cut off on 2 pages, but one of the things I will point out, it looks like this is a brand new table. It's not. Things have been added to it, but what we are trying to do throughout this ordinance is take the foot candles from all the different types of lighting that are spread across all the different sections and put them all in one place. Same for Kelvin rating. So these tables are new because this information is actually spread across the ordinance. We're trying to make it simpler and easier to find these things. But the ones that are proposed as new items, non-residential property lines, the 0.75 foot candles is the current requirement for all types. So what is new in this table is residential property lines being lowered to 0.5 foot candles. Public street right-of-way is still the same. Outdoor parking and loading is the same, as is total developed area. Illumination of vertical surfaces is a new proposal. Outdoor sales display is the same. Outdoor sports fields, I can't remember if that's new or existing. Do you know?
Let me look.
And then electronic message displays is new. I'll have to look and see. Jillian's going to check if outdoor sports was a proposal that was existing or a change.
I like the organization so that it's all in one spot. I think that reads a lot better. My only feedback on this is I can't conceptualize what these numbers mean in an experience, like what is 0.5 at a property line. So that's the only concern I have, is to say, is this right or wrong, or in, like, where does that fit? And I'm not necessarily asking y'all to do a demonstration for us where we come out at dark, and because that's really what we're talking about, to see that. But I want to make sure that we're not, sounds right. But how does that translate?
To help out with his query, that are these standards you pulled from somewhere else, other people's, or do you develop these with the engineers?
So we did check with the lighting engineers from Duke and from some of the commercial engineers that we work with that are in the private sphere. But to come to the numbers initially before we met with them, we looked at, for example, City of Asheville, and we looked at some of the counties. We specifically compared some of the more urban style lighting ordinances with ones that we would find in more rural counties to try to figure out if there were differences between those light level maximums depending on context. So this is where we landed, so that we felt like we were creating a realistic expectation that was not going to place too much of a burden on businesses, but still have the effect of trying to meet our goals for the exterior lighting and trying to reduce that glare and the, especially with the residential property line one. I mean, that is one of the primary complaints that we get, is the conflict between commercial and residential uses.
And that's the one I'm most concerned about, is that's a subdivision in Buncombe County, right? And now is 0.5 going to trigger all of these complaints about my neighbor's lights coming onto my property? And then y'all are in the business of sorting out the subdivision realities. I just want to make sure 0.5 is reasonable. And maybe it is.
Well, I think when we open this up to a public meeting, if there's anything wrong with these, we're going to hear about it from people who are professionals in the industry, I would say.
The outdoor sports field one is also.
Okay.
Because we talked about and I know we'll get to the Kelvin rating on that. That came up at the last meeting. Those.
So we've got some homework to do on that. Do we want to move to the next table? Maximum Kelvin ratings?
The 5,000 is a reduction from the last version. Is that right? Or we talked about that? Or is that the same number?
From the last version that you all saw?
Is this the current vehicular gas station Kelvin rating? So what we talked about last time was that first item, all lights except those listed below. We are proposing, or we had proposed, to break it into more rural and residential zoning districts at the lower amount of 3,000 degrees Kelvin, and then continue allowing, right now it's 4,300 Kelvin, which is not a Kelvin rating that is typical. Most are 4,000. So the proposal was that those commercially zoned districts would remain at that higher, bluer, well, it's more like daylight color, 4,000 degree Kelvin. At the last planning board meeting, there was some conversation about just keeping everything at or reducing everything to 3,000 degree Kelvin, if you want to discuss that at this point.
And that's why I was bringing that up. I think the gentleman who spoke today also spoke to that, particularly in reference to the outdoor sports fields, courts, and other performance areas, and saying that there really wasn't at least now, his opinion, a justification of having them at 5,000 compared to 4 or 3.
The outdoor sports fields.
And I may have misunderstood the comment, but that was also being offered as to say lower that Kelvin rating for those locations.
So
as well.
that might be appropriate for the gas station canopies. We are sensitive to the needs of the sports industry, though. One of the things that we talked about with our Parks and Recreation director was, in order to be able to host certain level sports events, you have to meet standard specifications for lighting in those sports fields. So we would have to double check. What I'm trying to say is that we would want to make sure that we're not going below what the standard requirement is, or it will impact our ability to attract certain types of sports events.
I'm fine if we just double check and ask what that is.
Okay.
I mean, it may be something that's in there, may not.
How do we feel about sorry, Shane.
But I think if you go to these, if you go to the outdoor sports field section, I think it says something different.
For vehicular.
Oh, well, okay, so here's another thing. Currently, right now, vehicular canopies have a 4,300 degree Kelvin limit. The way that this is written, it would raise that limit to 5,000 degree Kelvin. Part of that proposal is because they are consistently incapable of meeting the standard. So it's trying to fix some of the nonconformities that we have been struggling with.
So we would allow the nonconformities to, we'd raise the limit so that they were in conformity.
Right.
That is the way it's currently written. Now, we could break out outdoor sports field and courts and performance areas into their own separate category because they
Sure.
really
I think
are
you need
very
to.
separate
Yeah.
thing. Okay.
I think that would make sense. And then I would still have the question of, okay, well, are the vehicular gas station canopies not coming into conformity because they can't, or because they're choosing not to? And
They're
then I think
choosing not to.
Okay, so then why are we exempting from that, just to address those who are choosing not to comply?
Would you want to, so would we want to move them out of its own separately labeled item and just keep them in with all the other commercial uses, and then whatever you decide to do for that one?
I'd say split it just so that we can have conversations about them separately, because I think it's different reasons.
Yes.
I will say, the feedback we get from those companies is regarding safety for the canopies, is they want it to be bright light.
Well, the bright would be in lumens. Calvin is color.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I definitely don't want us to have a standard that's not safe, period. But I think it's worth looking at, well, what's the level of lumens that dictates bright enough lighting for safety purposes versus the color of the lighting?
Because the Kelvin has to do with the brighter or the bluer it gets, the worse it is for everybody, the birds, the environment, your eyes. So the warmer lighting is preferred, which is why you want to keep it like 3,500 or less.
The warmer lighting has health and safety, or health and environmental and health benefits. As you get into more the 4,000, 5,000, that is more like daylight. So I don't know what the research is on that, but the feeling is that it feels safer because it feels more like daylight. That's kind of how those two things play together.
Not to add something for y'all, but I mean, if there was research to point in either direction, I would be interested in just hearing what that was to say, here's the kind of lighting that allows users to feel safe at a Kelvin level when we sampled different, I don't know, may not exist.
It does. They're out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess it would just be helpful to know that in order to make an informed decision on what that number should be. I've had some background experience on the whole safety aspect of it from law enforcement perspective. And so I understand the safety aspect of it, but I also don't want to see us setting a standard too high on the blue scale. You could do more fixtures at a lower level and maybe achieve the same concept. So without seeing some technical on that, it's hard to really weigh in on that.
Okay.
But this
Shannon?
is
Sorry.
that's okay. I was just going to ask the Kelvins, does that affect visibility or
Yes.
okay?
So visibility is going to be affected across the spectrum. As you get into the more reds and oranges, it does change the way we see. But I'm not that educated about at what level it starts to become a problem. I mean, we definitely don't see as a common option in like commercial products, anything below 3,000. You don't typically see things that are more in that red area unless you're on the coast and they have like the coastal requirements because of the marine life. But 3,000 to 4,000 is pretty standard. And then as you get into more industrial uses, that's where you see the higher levels, 5, 6.
I was going to say, if the board would like, I could arrange a vendor to come in, 15, 20-minute PowerPoint on Kelvin and the differences, and they can just give us a where you can actually see it. You won't be able to experience it, but you can see it on the screen and they show you the different, what a 1200 Kelvin looks like, what a 8,000 Kelvin looks like. And if that would be helpful, I could get that arranged very easily.
And I do have that one slide. I don't know if that's at all helpful, but it showed the colors based on the number. We can always pull that up too. But yeah, I mean, a vendor
It's just-
obviously will have
that's an option.
better
If the
stuff.
board Would want a small presentation if that's appropriate.
Well,
I
I
can
wouldn't
set that
mind
up.
the small presentation if anybody thinks it's valid. But I don't
Maybe
know.
at the public hearing, I mean, there's no reason not to, they could present during that, couldn't they?
presentation during the public hearing. Or
As
we
part of
want
the
to just
public
do it
comment?
another meeting.
I think based on some of the requests you're asking of us, it's probably a good idea if we bring you back
Okay.
and not schedule a public hearing. And I will say, if you look, and we can try to find some for you, but there's lots of good information on the web that has visuals for what the different lighting means. We looked at that when we were drafting the ordinance, so one thing we can try to do is bring together some of those. for you to
If
look
you'd
at.
like to put presents, it just might be helpful for the board to would actually see what a 1200 Kelvin light bulb looks like versus 8,000.
Can you bring it in here and we turn out the lights and we turn them on?
Well, yeah, it can be, I can have them come set up a whole light display if you want.
That's fun.
Seasonal too. It's just a thought.
So where are we leaving that?
We will bring back some changes and Jay will be in touch about options for presentation.
Just let me
Okay,
know the date and I'll get it set up.
Okay.
and we'll do another meeting so we won't rush into the public hearing since there's going to be quite a few changes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think that's good.
And one last question to follow up on Nancy's. So visibility is kind of a function of kelvins. And when you get below a certain Kelvin, visibility is impaired to a certain degree for safety purposes. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to get into purple lights because then you can't
Right.
see anything. But we're not talking red. We're talking more on that yellowish hue end. So we'll have to do some research about the visibility question. I've got a note here to see what we can find. But I don't feel that we're in a low enough Kelvin rating number that we have that concern. But we'll follow up and just double check and bring you back more information about that.
And that would be my question. What's the difference between the visibility then for the safety aspect of it between 3,000 or 3,500 and 4,000 or 5,000, whatever other numbers we're looking
It
at?
seems like we're going between 5 or 4 or 3. That's the
Yeah.
range of the
Mhm.
universe
Yeah.
here.
And so kind of as a follow-up question, it doesn't really matter how many lumens you put out. It's that Kelvin that gives you the visibility, correct?
Well, it's lots of things. It's the
function
height,
together.
it's lumen rating, foot candles makes a difference how far away you are from the pole and that foot candle array. Kelvin can make a difference. So it's more of the package of the specifics of that fixture.
Yeah, so I'm kind of thinking of that canopy aspect of it. And if you drop the number, but maybe increase the number of fixtures, can you achieve visibility for safety purposes and also drop the Kelvin number?
Yeah.
Is that combination maneuverable so that you can
Yes.
achieve visibility, safety, and drop the Kelvin?
So you'll see when we go into that option to not have a photometric plan, you'll see that what we're doing to ensure that we're not exceeding our light levels is by pushing the poles further apart. So there's lots of ways where you could increase or lower the height to have, more spread but less visibility, or, there's just a lot of factors. It's not going to be one of those things that makes the difference.
Okay, based on that, I think I'd like to see that display then.
Okay.
Can I ask a question, going back a half a step? On the second line with more of the commercial application, is there any, did we want to have a discussion about lowering that? Is everybody happy with it at 4? We kind of jumped over to
Oh.
the 5,000 category.
I thought we were looking at all of it.
So at the last meeting, there had been a proposal to just make it a straight 3,000 degree Kelvin and not break it out into kind of rural residential versus commercial
Right.
separation.
And a quick question there, with regard to performance areas, is that something like an outdoor, like Montfort Theater? Is that kind of what that category is talking about?
Perhaps. I mean, we were thinking of like Rabbit, or that's in the city. But if there were some type of performance area that was out in the county where they might have stage lighting, they might have, food areas and other places where they've got lots of different types of lights and intensity of lights for some type of an event.
Okay, and do we have a definition of performance?
I
Areas.
don't believe so. Let's double check.
Because I'm kind of thinking of the Montfort Park Theater that's been there for 50 years.
Mhm.
And now that I think about it, it does have exterior lighting. And there's more and more of that's proposed that I've seen.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if it falls in that category and what all is included in a performance area.
I think any sort of stage. So music venues, plays. Trying to think what else.
We do not have a definition for it.
We
Can
do
we-
not, but I don't. Again, this is one that you probably go to
The dictionary is always really helpful.
the dictionary definition.
And I don't mean that flippantly, like it's in the code to say when we don't define,
Yeah.
you go to the dictionary. Y'all could even add the planner's dictionary in there, which I'm a big fan of, because it actually has really specific definitions that go to things like this.
Can we pull the performance areas into its own little category too, so that we can look at that
Okay.
with some specificity? Because I'm aware of a few venues in and around Buncombe County that have been existing for a while that might fall into that category, and they may have special needs. I don't know what those are.
Okay. So I will say we would break out gas station canopy, sports fields and courts, and performance areas into 3 separate categories, but we also have it up in foot candles. Are we okay with leaving it as one thing in the foot candles?
I think for consistency's sake, probably break it out.
Break it out? Okay.
Where does the gas station canopy fall in under the categories for foot candles?
That would be it would depend on whether it's a residential or non-residential property line. It's more about what the location of that property. So if they're on a public street right of way, they'll have to be at the 3. If they're adjacent to residential, then on that property line, it'd be 0.5. If they have a parking lot, the max is 6 for the parking lot. So it's a little bit different than just an overall Kelvin limit. It's more about looking at various areas on the property itself and which standards it might have to meet some of those, not just one of them.
Are theater and performance type lighting impacted by this? So in performance context, you sometimes put a spotlight on the lead singer or guitarist or whatever. And then in performance aspects, sometimes you flood the area with red light when you're doing a play or something like that. Are any of those aspects in this?
There's nothing in the ordinance that would regulate any of that as part of a performance.
And those are transitory anyway. They're not,
Temporary.
I think a better
Ish,
word,
well, depending.
temporary-ish.
Could we clarify that to point that they're temporary and they're fall under that category of exemption?
I do think you got to be careful with that. I mean, if you had, let's say someone bought 300 acres and put in a performance or a music venue, I think we're going to probably want standards related to how lighting's used at that music venue.
Right.
Yeah.
And if we're
So I
going-
don't know that it's an exemption that we're looking for.
Right. If you're looking for, if this is
The,
mostly safety and health,
laser
I'm not
light.
sure we're in the right area with that.
But I mean, there are
The theatrical
existing
stuff.
places that have lighting that might upgrade at some point. So we have to give some thought to performance. And it seems like it's its own category compared to a vehicular canopy.
Prohibitions.
Would it be the laser lights or high intensity lights? I mean, there might be some if it was totally out of control, it's probably going to fall under the prohibition for high intensity lighting, but there's nothing specific. So
I don't,
clarify performance lighting.
I mean, if you also, we don't have, I guess to make sure I understand, we don't have many of these, if any, within the county.
I'm
There's
not
some-
aware of any complaints related to the performance lighting.
There are performance areas. There's just not many complaints to them because they are so
Right.
transitory.
Eternal.
And one of those things is if you leave it, and if we've not got any complaints about it, and this system currently working, if we were to open it up and we end up with someone coming in, then when we regulate it, they become a nonconformity, and then they get to continue to do what was problematic for a period of time. Versus if we leave it the way it is, and then they come in and they're like, well, I need an exemption. I want you to change this in order to make this a viable strategy for us. Then we're in a position of amending the ordinance to allow them the flexibility they need, which puts, I think, us in a stronger position for dealing with it if it were to come up.
I just think each of these categories have very specific lighting needs. A vehicular canopy is one animal. A sports stadium is a different animal, and obviously an outdoor performance area is a third animal. So I kind of feel like they need their categories, and then probably some technical expertise as to what's required or should be prohibited. I
Okay.
was also thinking about, I don't know that we have these in this county, but there are places you can go in the South where they have outdoor ATV or motorcycle parks that are lit. And I don't know if that falls under a performance area or what that is.
No, that would have to meet commercial standards.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can do some research on how other places maybe have regulated performance areas and bring some ideas back. Is that the intent? Is that we would want some specific regulations for that kind of use?
At this point, I'm just more information and maybe separating it out is
Okay.
the two things I would request.
So we are only on page 2.
It's
Just to
11:30.
check,
Yeah.
it is approaching 11:30. We can stay, staff can stay as long as we need to, but I just want to check with the board and see.
Could I ask one more question before I make that decision? 'Cause I didn't ask it correctly before. Of the zoning categories that are currently in the 4,000 Kelvin box, this is a nitpick, but are any of those possibly eligible to move down to 3?
What do you mean eligible?
Would it make sense for them, or
Neighborhood service does tend to be more of a transition zone between residential areas and more higher intensity commercial. That would be like neighborhood store or just some of those smaller commercial areas that you might see in the middle, like in the middle of a neighborhood crossroads. So that would be the only one where I would say, yes, that would be
Okay.
more appropriate at 3. Conference resort tend to be really very large parcels. They can be really rural, but there also tend to be ones where you would have more events. You'd have more types of uses that you would want, like a higher, more daylight kind of option.
Right. I don't have a strong feeling about this. I was just looking for an improvement at the margins here. And if anybody else has a strong feeling about it, just wanted to bring it up. Now you can go back to what you were saying.
So I was just polling the board, seeing if we could keep going or.
I'm good till 11:45.
I need to leave at 11:30. So why don't we, Nancy,
I was just going to say, maybe we should
Continue this.
continue it next time.
okay,
Would agree.
so where did we stop?
We stopped at 2 luminaire type.
You need a motion for that?
All right.
Probably. I don't know.
We need a motion for, and move we suspend the conversation to be continued at our next planning board meeting, which is November
The 17th, it looks like.
17th. And we will pick up at section 2, luminaire type.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Then we will resume next month.
Motion to
Okay,
adjourn.
yes. Now we need an
Motion to
official
adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
Done and seconded.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
No opposed? Okay.